Well, thank you all for coming. Today we have Rick Montgomery and Rick Lozano, who are the owners of HT Care LLC, and it's a 2-year-old company. The company provides simple, unobstructed solutions that assist the seniors with aging in place. They're committed to using the simplest technologies to enhance the lives of seniors and helping them age at home safely. So the company focuses on 3 things: independent living, safety, and dignity. And they offer the following solutions: seniors at home, emergency notification for seniors in need, automatic fall detection and vital monitor, and seniors who drive. So today they will be speaking about the current state of aging in place technologies, what works, what doesn't work, what needs to be developed, and the challenges of the market. So thank you very much for this, and looking forward to hearing your presentation. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. This is fun. In the summer of 1972, my parents wrote a check to the University of Delaware so that their son could pursue studies in electrical engineering. I don't think they ever figured I'd be sitting here talking to you guys from this side of the podium rather than the other. My name is Rick Lozano. The company is HT Care Systems. Rick Montgomery, my business partner, is right here. He's handed this one over to me, so I'm going to be doing this presentation. And I'm going to keep this a little bit informal because we've attended a lot of these, and what I didn't intend to do here is get up here and kind of lecture. We'd like to have this be conversational and interactive. So at any point in time when anybody wants to pipe in, please feel free to do so. Here's kind of the drill. I think it's important to know who we are and our background and how we got to this place, because the rest of what will follow it'll make a lot of sense. Well, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about basically our journey to get our company to where it is at this point in time, and at some point we're going to talk about what we need. And I'm glad you're here because the student base that attends these meetings is a great brain trust, and the research and the development that's going on at this level. If we can impact that, I think what we can put out as far as products and services to the seniors and their caregivers later on would be very, very, very important. We're going to talk about the comparative costs of care and then just a basic general discussion. All right, here's our history. And I'm going to toot Rick's horn here for a minute. His company, or the company from which we sprung, is called HTC, Home Technology Consultants. It's a 16-year-old company based in Athens, and it's in the AV world, it's what we'd call an integrator. Their purpose and their business was designing, deploying, and supporting very sophisticated automation systems in the home. Core competencies were security, lighting control, distributed audio and video, some high-end 2-channel home theater, data and communication. The goal being to make all these devices easy for the homeowner to use, implement from any room in the home. The challenge in that was to take a bunch of different products from different manufacturers with different brand names on them and make them all play well together. A big challenge. My experience is 36 years in consumer electronics. Therefore, I have no core competencies and I don't play well with others, sir. This is a typical home. As a matter of fact, this is a home that was recently completed, 50,000 square feet if I'm not mistaken. So you can imagine the challenges that would face getting the automation system to work in this. This is the neighbor who chose another integrator, and see, that's what works in this house. All right, so how did we get to where we are now? Rick had a client about, what, 2 years ago? About 3 years ago. A retiring oil executive who was building his dream retirement home. And the model that Rick's other company followed was to be at the early stages of the design of the home, working with the builder and the architect and the homeowner to make sure that the things that were done in the home facilitated the technologies that were being put in place. And somewhere along the project, the homeowner was diagnosed with a life-limiting illness, at which point the plan was probably to scrap the entire project and dump it all, but he decided he wanted to continue to build the house and live there throughout his life. So the challenge there was what had to be done to this home in order to facilitate that. And the architect at one point asked Rick, is there anything that you could do to leverage the technology that was put in this place to help him live there, and talk a little bit about some of those things.
Yeah, 3 years ago we had not given any consideration to these types of things, so we kind of went to the drawing board and thought about, okay, what can we do with the automation and the audio video integration in the house. And this man clearly had some resources that most of us don't have. There were live-in quarters for a nurse in the house that we had when the time came. So we came up with a few solutions. We were using simple nurse call devices next to his bed and in his master bath. But if you were to activate those nurse call devices, a WAV file would play a message throughout the whole house music system saying that help was needed in the master bath or the master bed. We came up with a solution. A normal emergency pendant would not work in a 10,000 square foot house, which is what this house was. So we came up with a whole house solution for that, where he had a pendant. Again, if he pressed it, that WAV file would play throughout the house. Also, a text message would go out to the nurse's BlackBerry, telling her the same thing. Help is needed in the master bath. Help is needed in the master bedroom. And one concern they had was him falling out of bed. And so we were able to employ some devices that were actually created for securing yachts. They'll sense someone walking on the deck of a yacht in the floor system around the bed and calibrate them so that if he were to fall out of bed, again, the text message would go out to the nurse. The WAV file would play out through the house. A few things like that. And that was kind of what got us thinking about, hey, there's a need here that's not being addressed.
Okay. So the creation of HD Care Systems resulted from that, and some of the research that we did was to kind of find out, who is it that needs these technologies? Who can benefit from this? And we started basically a grease board project to sort of list everybody that could benefit. Obviously, seniors that who are aging in place, and that's one of the reasons that we're all here. We also looked at people that have chronic diseases at home, not necessarily the elderly, people who are disabled, patients in rehab, the adult children of an aging parent. This is an important group, and I think one of the things that we'll sort of flow into as this morning goes on is this particular segment. Caregivers, in-home care companies who provide care for these folks, and certainly healthcare professionals. So we started looking at what was available on the market. There is a field of products that are out there, all claiming to be aimed at helping seniors age in place, and we started sifting through those to kind of come up with what we believed was a concise suite of products and services that addresses all these folks and all the needs that they would have. So as far as needs goes, what is needed? What does somebody need in order to successfully and responsibly age in place? The first thing is emergency assistance. Clearly, these folks are at risk. The big one being falls, certainly accidents around the home, and people who are alone and are helpless and need, have feelings of despair. The other thing we identified was that we needed good information about the way people live. What their activities are, how they deal with their medications, and to some extent as well, their general health and wellness. And another one is that there needs to be a good format for those involved with caring for these folks to communicate. The caregivers, the families, and the health professionals. We boiled this down to basically two different technological categories. The reactive one and the proactive one. Now, neither one of these is right or wrong, or there's not good or bad to the others. The reactive technologies sort of rely on something bad happening, and under that heading, the emergency response systems dependence, which we also offer. We'll talk about that a little bit. And then the proactive part being, what can we do to help put information in the hands of caregivers that might indicate trends that would lead to declining health that we can impact. So, emergency response systems. I'm going to breeze through this really quickly because I don't want to dwell on some of these technologies. The PowerPoint that we have here was sort of is our standard presentation that we would give to folks that don't know what we do or don't know much about this. Clearly, this room is different. The emergency response systems. The first one is the PERS, the Personal Emergency Response System, the dependent everybody's seen. And there's also automatic fall detection. Those are the two categories. This is a typical PERS. And what it is reactive. It is the most established technology out there with better than 2.5 decades. And we've all seen Dr. Koop on TV talking about this device. It is the most affordable. It's the most easily available. And the simplest to implement. So would that necessarily make it the best? It's a good question. We do believe that it is the minimum accepted level of protection. Problem with them are that seniors tend not to push the button when they fall. There's either they're incapable or they're unwilling to do that. So there's some challenges with that. Under the emergency response systems automatic fall detection, this is a fairly new technology. These are devices that do not require the push of a button in order to work, which we think is a good thing. There is a panic button on there if somebody needs it on a non-fall emergency, and there's a few different technologies in which on the way these devices work. Here's briefly. One is changes in barometric pressure. The device, the premise is that the barometric pressure here is different than it is on the floor. Someone falls, it senses that change in barometric pressure and then triggers a call to a call center. And that works. The problem with it, though, is that the barometric pressure from a seated position to a floor is not nearly as great. So there's this tendency for this thing not to pick up a fall from a commode or possibly a bathtub. The oldest technology is the mercury tilt switch, and probably very few companies use this, and probably fewer will go in the future because it relies on the device moving, which would trigger it. It's very prone to false positives.
Both of those solutions are. The barometric pressure solution also is. If somebody opens the door in the winter, it calls that a fall.
Right. The one that we have sort of landed on is one called a trivector digital accelerometer. You've all seen this. You've probably held one. It's the same technology that's used in a Wii remote. All right? That device, when you're playing that game, the console knows where that device is in space and which way it's moving. All right? The system that we have employed is called a Halo. This is a picture of it, and it's worn on a chest strap. That has the same technology in it. And what it does is it looks at its activity as it's being worn. It compares that activity and that motion to how many? 1,200 algorithms that are stored, and it compares it to that, and it sees one that matches up with what they've stored. It identifies that as a fall, immediately calls the call center, and the emergency alert is sent. The neat thing about this as well is that it not only does it place a call to the call center, but it can send text messages and email messages to people that are listed on the list of respondents, the caregivers. So 911 gets a call, but also the people in the family members that need to be notified. Does some other interesting things. Bless you. Yes.
Hold on, I'll finish the description and then I ask the question.
Okay. The other things that this particular device does is it will track vital signs when it's worn on a chest strap. It will monitor heartbeat and skin temperature. Activity, it works also as a pedometer. It knows when people are moving and how many steps they take and whether they're at rest or active. It can also gather some data through some Bluetooth enabled devices, primarily weight and blood pressure. All this data is stored on a server and is made available to caregivers that are on the list. It will also track these stumbles and falls or any of these activities, and that's the cool thing, because what this will do is it'll capture those precursor falls that always lead up to that big one, which usually lands somebody in the hospital. So if you look at this history of the stumbles, you can actually detect and determine that there's a pattern going on here.
So my question is related of how you develop this product. I would like to know how the idea is originated, how it's developed in terms of how many people are involved, and the time frame of when or how long does it take to be developed. And also, if at this point when you have the idea of developing this product, where is this idea coming from? Is it because you saw some competitors doing something similar? You grounded in some data or observations that people needed that? So I know many questions, but do you get an idea of what I'm interested in?
Right. All right. Speak about your grandmother, and then we'll go into some of the way the development of the product part.
About the time that we had the client that was diagnosed with an early life-ending illness, I had a situation with my grandmother, who was a very sharp lady and was moved into a facility, and it wasn't a clear-cut case she needed to be there, but she kind of was just across the threshold of needing to be there, and it was like falling off a cliff. She declined rapidly after that, and that was the other thing that triggered me to think that, well, it sure seems like there ought to be some technologies that could have helped her stay in her house longer. One thing I want to clarify is that the things we're talking about, with the exception of, we start talking about monitored living, there are some features that we have helped the manufacturer develop and that we've added to the platform, but we didn't create these products.
Right.
We went out looking for what's there, what works, what doesn't work. We've tested a lot of this stuff very extensively, and then as far as determining what the needs are, we really immersed ourselves into senior provider professional groups. We've met numerous people. Scott Morrison's we met some time ago and talked to him quite a bit about what are the challenges he faces. A number of people within assisted living facilities, even at the State Department of Human Resources. So we kind of went out in the community of professionals, and I'll say that they have embraced us in a way that we would not have expected. But talking to people who work with seniors regularly, both in facilities and in their homes, helped drive us to determine, okay, these are the problems we need to address, and what can we go find that might address those.
How cooperative have you found these manufacturers to be in kind of redesigning and making things more comfortable to use? Because this is kind of like a national championship belt, and
Well,
and it's
that's an excellent point,
right.
and I'll address that. It varies from one manufacturer to the next. I don't want to hijack this from you, but one of the things that we talked about at the beginning that we wanted to address was talk about what are the shortcomings, what are the things that need to change and develop. And this is a perfect example because this technology works. It detects falls reliably, and it does not fall. It is a very stable piece of equipment. The technology has been figured out. The form factor has not.
Right.
Now, to give you an idea of the size of that, it's about like an exercise monitor. That's really what it's like wearing. And we get a lot of resistance to that. We get a lot of pushback to it. In fact, the successful installations of this device almost always follow a similar model. We've got one we just did recently where the woman's 92 years old. She had a fall. She lives with her daughter. Her daughter's a school teacher. Her daughter makes sure that her mother is wearing this device when she leaves to go to work, and when she comes home from work in the afternoon, she can take it off. And while she has it on, there's an iPhone app. She can glance her iPhone and see, okay, mom's up moving around. She's doing the stuff she normally does. But the form factor of this needs to be improved. If there's a way to develop that technology and a solution that can be worn more easily, more comfortably, that's easier to put on, then I think you would get compliance to go way up on this device.
Yeah.
That's what we kind of see, that there had to be some event that made the individual, cross that bridge to say, okay, I'll put up with that, plus that caregiver.
Right. Well, the big event is the one where you're going, look, we want you to live at home, we want you to age here, and this is the way, these are the things that you need to do in order to facilitate that.
And let me follow up on this just a little bit. Everything that we're going to talk about today, this is true about. If we had to rely on the senior saying, yeah, I want that, let's put it in, we would have packed up our bags and gone home a long time ago. Before my dad died, who was a neat, nice guy, just as pleasant as he could be, he was still watching the Curtis Mathis TV we grew up with the changer that went ka-chunk, ka-chunk, ka-chunk. And I owned an AV company. And it was like, Dad, wouldn't you like us to get you a nice new TV with a remote control? They get to be too lazy to get up and change the channels. They don't need a TV anymore. It could have cost $5. It wouldn't have made any difference. Now the TV died, and we got him a new TV, and he loved it, and you couldn't pry the thing out of his hand after that. But seniors are going to be resistant to change. They're going to be resistant to spending money. The successful implementation of most of what we talk about almost always occurs after a discussion with us, the children, particularly the primary caregiver, and the seniors, and there's a point in that conversation where there's an acknowledgement that we are all on the same team here. We all want you to stay in the home. You want to stay in the home. Yep. And this is a way to make that happen.
Who's your economic buyer to?
It's usually the caregiver that's actually pulling through.
Yeah. And it's usually...
I think you put the order of things differently. Like, I'll say first that seniors are resistant of investing on technology. They're not resistant to change. In some cases, there is some resistance, but usually the resistance to change is subject to how much I need to pay to acquire these. So that's one. The second, I wanted to ask a question. You address that this product has a barrier, the barrier of implementation because of the lack of design. So what prevents you to design it? What are the things that you need in order to design it? We have here, I'm a designer. We work at the School of Industrial Design. We can easily have a studio or students working to look at ways of making these products more usable. So then what?
I think there's a couple of...
Why is the barrier to design?
It's the access to the environment where it's going to be used and getting a real-time feedback on that from the senior themselves. And all of this is prefaced by a very blunt conversation that you have with them that is recognizing their desire to remain independent and hearing them say, I do not want to go to assisted living. Okay, well, if that's the case, then here's a solution that would allow you to have a rapid response if you were to fall. How many of your friends have broken their hips and then they declined? Hit them where they relative, and then eventually you get around to this. And then you got mind share. They had a part in the decision rather than all their siblings. They'll sit there and tell me, look at what I got to deal with. I got these 7 people telling me what to do. And
well, testing is also another. We have a lot of partners here at DATHA that are willing to offer participants to test this technology.
I was talking to a 96-year-old yesterday about a PERS system, and she just didn't think she was ready yet.
Yeah.
She was adamant,
Well,
and yet the question that I had is the distance from the base unit that they can go, because I am seeing tremendous falls at the mailbox. That is the #1 place that I'm seeing falls, more so than the bathroom or anywhere else in the house.
Interesting.
They get out there and they'll get off on the grass or something and they can't turn around, and next thing you know they're laying in the
It's
yard.
always at the curb.
Yeah. Yeah, well, the specification that the manufacturers claim is, many of them will put a range on there, but it's unreliable because there's so many things that come into play. Where the console is located in the house, the wiring in the house, the architecture of the house, all those things can tend to affect the operating range. So I don't think that we could reliably sit here and go, well, it's good to 300 feet. I mean, it might be good to 300 feet as long as there's nothing between the console and the person wearing it. But once you introduce architecture, that's a real problem.
Your fall sensors that you put in the floor, the yacht deck idea, how big of a component is that? Is that something that could be put in later, after the fact?
If you had access to it, it's quite small. It's about the width of a pencil and about 4 inches long. You use several of them. That's not something that we're actively doing because that is a pretty high ticket price item. That was kind of a one-off for that big house. To your point, Scott, I think we've heard that as well. That does it work at the mailbox? And we try to test it at the mailbox. And a modern spec house with a small yard, probably so. An older house back when they had big yards and longer driveways, probably not. But I think that's something we need to, we have the ear of the manufacturer on that we need to make clear to them that, hey, why can't there be an accessory antenna for these devices?
Right,
that
maybe
would,
goes near you could tie into the light at the garage.
would extend the range of that.
This one's cellular or not?
The actual fall detection device
The Halo's, yeah.
for communication with the base
is
or
not.
Right.
Cellular, but the base is.
The base can communicate out over cellular with an additional device, but it's typically landline. You can prefer
And internet.
landline if we can do that. If not, then we can do cellular.
Yeah, there's three connections, including power that are required: the landline phone, and then to the internet. No.
And Claudia, you brought up something that we didn't address, which is, I think that's part of what we're trying to do today, is to put this information in front of you guys, the people who are in academics and design, that, hey, these are shortcomings we see that need to be addressed.
And this would be going to Halo, the company that actually manufactures it.
Yep.
And it would be good to get them in. They're out of Huntsville,
Yep.
a couple of young guys.
Yep.
The software engineer is a very bright guy. They could come in. In fact, a fun presentation would be the implementation side, what you guys have seen, and the design team talking about this in kind of a three-dimensional. That'd be a very interesting conversation.
The majority of the pushback we have is
For spring of
Yeah.
2011.
the big pushback we've gotten is primarily from gentlemen. They're not used to wearing something like this around their chest. It's different for a woman, so they're less resistant to it. But it's difficult to put on and it's difficult to take off, and it's uncomfortable when you're wearing it. So if there's a way to eliminate the strap and have this worn small, light, and unobtrusive, I think we'd have a winner.
And I think the challenge I think they're facing with it now is that the only way that they can truly get it stable and not prone to false positives is for it to be on the trunk.
Right.
You start putting it on the hand, and then you get all kinds of crazy motions. Or on the pendant.
That's going to have to evolve before the product's accepted.
Sure.
I would think just from a perspective of talking to an older adult or a caregiver, there has to be a level of trust and there has to be a level of knowing what this is. And just even hearing some of the technological parts of this are different for me. And I can think of as being a caregiver. There are so many things that I think as you market the information or you provide this information, you've got to instill, how does the monitoring work, and to establish a level of trust, and also just a level of this is not anything real foreign. Does that make sense? Because if you don't really understand it, you're not going to trust it, and you're not going to really want something that is not known.
I think you're spot on, and one of the things that we learned early on, both with the emergency pendant and with this, is that the last thing we want is for that senior to have not pushed the button until it's an emergency and they need to. And the monitoring service that we use is very attuned to this. And so you just want to talk to somebody, press that button. go right ahead. We literally have a lady who presses that button at 7 o'clock every morning. Everybody in the facility knows her. And they'll have a little morning chat with her. And we encourage that because we want them to feel like it's no big deal to activate the device.
There's a couple meaningful projects here. That, and then this idea of the front yard into the mailbox is a big deal because several years ago I had a really good friend that his mother was in her 90s, and he lived in a house that you would not call this a big hill going from the mailbox to the house. It was, it was just a gradual incline, maybe a 4-foot change of elevation, maybe 5 foot max, from the street to the house. But she got to the point where that was impossible for her to exit the house because that was too steep of an incline. Now, if you look at all the yards in Atlanta too, elevations are all over the place, either down or up. And ever since that experience, it gave me a different perspective of the comment that seniors make about, I feel like I'm trapped, I can't leave the house. And it's because they can't even walk to the mailbox, which they view as one of the simplest things that they've ever done. And I'm dealing with this looking ahead, even for my own mother, because the house is elevated. There's a lot of steps going down to the mailbox. We've taken the care to break up those steps and engineered landscaped in stairs and things like that, and did those kind of things. But the comment about getting to the mailbox is like one of the last big things that somebody feels like they got to do every day. And they're going to try to make that run regardless of how they feel. And I think you're going to see more of that over the next 3 years because that age group is moving into that zone where this is going to be an accelerated item.
Well, one thing, when you think about compliance, which is really kind of this broad topic, in some ways there are unique issues, but to a large degree this is human nature, and it really doesn't matter what age you're at. We all make a series of decisions based on trade-offs, and you think about, younger in life, you probably don't pay as much attention to, for example, health and well-being, and as you get a little older and have some issues, and all of a sudden that becomes more important. People that have exercised and had, for example, knee problems are warned to wear a knee brace, which is a real frustrating thing to have to wear, especially in warm weather. But finally, their sports orthopedist says, okay, one more injury and you're going to have to get a knee replacement. Well, all of a sudden, then they're going to be wearing that every single time.
Yeah.
And so, that's really not that different. And here, of course, the freedom and mobility to live at home is a trade-off that, okay, some minor inconvenience to wear the device that might be uncomfortable, keep it charged, all those kind of things. I think in general that's not too different, really, whatever the age group is.
Are any of the, you mentioned the 1,200 algorithms, I think. Are any of those algorithms specific to gait or the walking pattern? And the reason I say that is because some of the behavior management drugs, like Zyprexa, a well-known antipsychotic, the FDA says that this drug is known to cause impaired gait in the elderly. So if you had, and there are other drugs that do that too, and other combinations of drugs. So if you had a device like that or a spin-off that could be calibrated to show a normal pattern of walking or gait versus an impaired one, then you would have a very precise, very important predictor that a fall was coming. And that might even point to other areas like osteoporosis or deterioration of a hip or something. But maybe the device doesn't do that.
That's a good question.
I don't know the answer to that,
Yeah.
but we'll find out.
But that's something. Impaired gait thing is a very interesting.
It does operate as a pedometer, so it will count steps, or it will look at activity.
Yeah, the issue that you'd have is that if they're already on the drug, then it's going to be picking up the database, from.
Yeah, the baseline has been established before, right? Yeah.
Yeah, this gets toward the long-term trending analysis. That I talked to this company about that at the CEX, though. They mentioned that they were trying to get toward that, but not there yet.
Right. Yeah. There's two. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, let's move on. Oh, by the way, here's the iPod interface. So you can see there is a fall alert, what time it happened, the fact that there's an operator handling the event. This one is being worn. There's the heart rate, skin temperature, body position is horizontal. They're on the floor, or the bed or wherever. Right. That's an example of what someone in a caregiver position could see at any point of the day.
Is that downloaded as an Apple Store app? Or?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's how they do it?
Yeah.
Do you see that users themselves, they would like to be aware of that information, not just caregivers or family members?
I don't know.
No, they never ask, can I see if I have calls, income, or the data or anything?
No, I think as we move forward in time and we start seeing people needing this who were of the baby boomer generation, who were using computers and are more familiar with this kind of thing, that will probably change.
Right.
But with the senior population that we are currently monitoring, I don't think we've had a single client express an interest in that. And they might after we're kind of out of the picture. They may have asked their daughter, whoever that caregiver is, to look at it, but we're not hearing that.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so the challenge. Oops. And we just spoke about this. The challenges that we face with these is of how easy it is to put on and take off. It is uncomfortable for many wearers, and the short battery life. One of the other shortcomings that we found is that it does need to be charged roughly every 48 hours. So there's a habit that needs to be followed, that it needs to be taken off, put on the charger, otherwise it won't operate for a long period of time. So speaking to the students, and this is why I inserted this slide, these are sort of the refinements that we would like to see on a device like this that would be helpful. Something that would be easy to put on and take off, certainly more comfortable, require less maintenance and less handling on the part of the user. Certainly smaller is better, and waterproof and water resistant is of course important. It is already, but that's something that we need to keep in mind so that it can be worn in the shower where there may be a greater risk of falls as well. And I guess the one we should have put on here is extended range. So thank you for bringing that up. All right. The second part of the two technologies that we're talking about is our monitored living solutions, and this is going to probably kick off a lot of discussion. So the difference between what we just talked about and this is these are more proactive. All right. This is a way that we can actually get in front of those declining health issues. The function of these devices is to gather data. All right, that's all they do is gather data. Typically activities of daily living and to some extent wellness as well, their general health. The purpose of these devices is to provide information to the caregiver so that they can make a better determination of the type and level of care that the senior needs. All right, and this all requires the interpretation of the data that is being collected, hopefully to stave off crisis before it occurs.
Let me interrupt for a second. The very first thing we need help with is a new name generic for the monitored living system.
Yeah.
That's the best we've come up with. We've got to come up with a new generic name for these technologies that does not use the word monitor. Nobody wants to be monitored.
Yeah. Right. This is a slide showing the types of devices that are out there and what they would gather. Contact sensors, cameras, motion sensors. A lot of these products were born out of the security world, and they're relatively generic. There's nothing particularly new on there. They're just simply gathering data.
Which direction are you finding these vendors going in terms of the interface? Are they going Wi-Fi? Are they Bluetooth? I mean, is there a standard that they're moving towards?
That's a great question. We spoke about this yesterday.
Excellent question.
Yeah.
There's a handful of manufacturers that are working on it, and we actually became dealers for I think all but one, and have played with them. And there's one in particular that we're fond of, and some that we're not fond of. One of the biggest challenges we've seen is that a number of the manufacturers, in an effort to to not have to engineer this from the ground up, have tried to take advantage of everything that was out there, and so there's one in particular that's using all of this: Bluetooth,
X10,
Z-Wave, and X10, which is from the automation world a horrible platform, incredibly unreliable. There actually is a wireless technology that was created, I don't know, the last 7, 8 years, something like that.
Yeah, maybe 8 years.
Called Zigbee, which was a communications platform created for automation. It's wireless, it's a mesh technology, it's extremely reliable. It has revolutionized the automation world. It's made wireless lighting control and things of that sort very reliable. Wireless automation platforms reliable where they used to not be. We think that that's probably the horse to bet on. A number of the manufacturers seem to be focusing on Zigbee technology for integrating these devices.
There's one possible additional phenomenon, because of the iPad, I'm seeing just incredibly small mini servers being developed now. I mean, they're smaller than a Linksys router, and it's a server, and it's keeping those devices in check. Well, that could be any Wi-Fi device.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, there certainly is Wi-Fi as a part of these,
right.
Often, but the challenge you run into, I don't think anyone's making motion sensors, contact sensors, current sensors,
right.
pressure sensors that are operating on Wi-Fi.
Right.
They're making them that operate on Zigbee.
And the sensors are mainly going to the Zigbee. Is that what you're thinking?
That's what we see happening, and certainly what we hope to happen, and we think that's the most reliable platform.
Is that an open standard?
It is.
It is.
So that's why it's growing.
Right.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's and the mesh network there allows it to expand without a need for repeaters. They actually act as a repeater.
We were just talking about this yesterday. Because it's an open standard, we're amazed at some of the things that have jumped on board. I mean, Kwikset and Baldwin are making lock sets now that are Zigbee powered, where you can remotely control your lock set from your iPhone or whatever.
For the home or
Yeah.
commercial?
Home.
Yeah.
Wow. What do they call that? Is it a kind of special?
Home something. I forget what the name is for.
Yeah. I mean, we were when we were in Home Depot yesterday and looking at some of these things.
Smart lock or smart
Yeah.
security or something.
Yeah. Something like that.
Very good.
Yeah.
The same thing is happening in the heart rate monitors, all the exercise, all that. ANT is the global standard, and it's just sweeping through it, and all these standalone standards are disappearing.
Right. Yeah. The thing that what we're looking at is not necessarily each one of those individual devices, but what we're interested in is the core of this. Something that was able to communicate with anything that comes out there, and then present the data in a way that it can be useful to the people that are using it. Somebody had raised a hand? No? Okay.
I just have a question. Now, for remote monitoring, are these devices working mostly on Wi-Fi or cellular, or is it stored locally and then analyzed later?
For our monitored living solutions, they are sitting on the network.
All right.
So we have to have some sort of a broadband connection. It doesn't have to be a particularly fast broadband connection unless we're doing video, which we get a lot of pushback on. And it's by no means the main thrust of what we're doing. Now, we can also do that with a Wi-Fi card, provided there's 3G available or something like that.
Yeah, one problem that I see with Wi-Fi is that, of course, you need to keep that Wi-Fi network always running, which sometimes can get a problem.
It can be. We actually are able to address that some with our automation background. We can, if you get a problem where you have to reboot periodically, we can automatically reboot that modem. We can address that somewhat because of our automation stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
Is that if you're notified at the desk, or is it detecting that the modem's down and it provides a reboot?
That's a good point. The solutions that we like are actually not just reporting directly to the caregiver, they're going through our server. So we know immediately if it goes down. We can actually see that on our end, and then we can reboot a modem from our end immediately. We can actually automate that, where if it goes down, the first thing that happens is the modem reboots. And then if that doesn't bring it back up, and it's down for more than X amount of time, then people start getting text alerts that, hey, the system's down. And it's still gathering data, so when it does come back up, that data is available.
Right.
Keep in mind, this is a proactive solution. We're not using this for an emergency response, so it's not as mission critical.
You typically install these with a USB.
With the UPS, you mean? Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Power supply, yeah, absolutely.
And because that just takes the whole lightning and all that.
Well, I'm from the AV business. I deal with lightning all the time. People ask, is this lightning protection? Well, no, it's protection if lightning hits a mile down the house or down the road. It's not protection if it hits
the house.
Hits the tree next door. We actually just had a 28,000 square foot house get hit by lightning in the storms a few weeks ago. Nothing worked. Everything.
They didn't put in a crowbar system?
It has a lightning rod system in the house. I mean, everything. We actually brought in lightning protection guys to engineer that system. But I mean, nothing's going to survive that kind of hit.
Yeah. And it's real difficult to predict, Okay, let's move on. All right, so yes?
Instead of monitoring, what do you call it? Sensible living system? Sensing? I don't know.
Submit your suggestions at the end of the session
Maybe we'll
today.
start a little contest.
Yeah, that's it.
You have an iPad, whoever comes up with the best answer. That's actually not a bad idea.
That's a real good idea. I mean, we have like.
And it's also a very nice word, sensible, it's very friendly and humane. So, and it's still, falling into the area of monitoring or sensing. So anyway, just it's up.
I like the idea of having a contest.
Yeah, I did too.
Fun.
That was the idea that I had.
Thanks.
Let's be honest.
Well, hey, Dara, to your company name, Accessible, and the way that came about, I think makes a lot of sense. It's the ability that it gives. We're struggling with that. Yeah.
All right, creative juices start flowing.
There you go. All right, so this we just touched about this. Sensors collect the data. Here's the kind of things that we can look at. Bed activity, when they get into bed, when they get out of bed, and how restfully they sleep while they're there. The frequency of bathroom visits, how long they're in the bathroom, access to med stores. This kind of is the core of the things that we believe everybody should want to look at, all right? Because these are the ones that kind of give you the indicators of the way things are going. When the cooktop is turned on and off, how long it's on. General activity around the house, do that with motion sensors. Of course, the entry points, front and the back doors, which we can trigger alerts with. This is particularly important if you're dealing with somebody who tends to wander. And then video when desired, and when desired is very low. We have put a couple in recently where video was a big part of the solution, but primarily that people don't want to have something looking at them in their home.
And we never cease to be surprised at the things people, when we're designing one of these systems, they'll articulate a particular problem. Is there some way that we can watch this? And a recent one was, is there a way we can tell when the liquor cabinet opens? And the guy's got some early stages of dementia, and he likes to have a few cocktails, which contributes to his dementia issues. And so for them to know how much he's drinking at night and how that correlates to the problems he has the next day was very useful information. And so, absolutely, we can monitor the liquor cabinet. It's no problem at all.
I don't know where are the next slide. Can you go back to the previous one? Can you give us the biggest flaw of each one of those?
Biggest flaw?
What are the biggest flaws in bed activity? What are the biggest flaws in back to visit frequency?
Let me make sure I understand. Are you asking me for shortcomings in the technology?
Correct.
Okay. Well, I would say we probably gamed this to preclude that, because the things that we're putting up there are the things that we've experimented with that we know work consistently and well. And so you're not seeing the things that have serious flaws. We've kind of gleaned that out. Bed detection, it works extremely well.
Right.
Yeah, were you just pointing at meds?
Yeah, well, let's talk about bed detection, because not only does it work extremely well, the sensors that we use for bed activity actually have driven us to look at other solutions that we hadn't initially considered for homes. Again, you keep in mind that we come from the technology world. We don't come from the health field, but the sensors that we use for bed activity, could actually trigger. And we're looking at implementing this in some facilities, low-level lighting on the floor that when somebody gets out of bed between the hours of, say, 9 or 10 o'clock and 6 o'clock in the morning, typically to go to the bathroom, it lights a path to the bathroom. Rather than turning on overhead lights that could be, make it difficult to see, it lights the path to the bathroom. They can also send a signal to a nurse call station in an assisted living facility saying that Mrs. Jones is out of bed. It's 3 a.m. All right? If she's not back by 3:15, maybe it's time for one of the nurses to go down there and check to make sure she's not on the floor. So that works very, very well. And tied in with, again, bathroom visits. And we can, the platform that we look at allows us to overlay these events. So you can see that at 3 o'clock when she got out of bed, she did go to the bathroom, or she went to the stove or the refrigerator, did whatever she wanted to do.
Let me.
So my question is more tailored, like, for example, the previous example, the strap with the for fault detection. The technology is reliable, it's stable, it works. Yet, you still have that 7 a.m. person calling, pressing the button every day, and that's kind of like a flaw. The technology works, but you have to learn to overcome those little things that people don't do well. That's what I was going to. Make sense?
Yeah,
I think so.
yeah. Go ahead.
Have a comment for that?
No.
Yeah, I think we're going to bump into that as we go down this list a little bit.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to mention about bed activity also is that not only is that a reliable indicator of when they're in and out of bed, but it also gives us a very reliable indication of how restful their sleep is. If they're tossing and turning, that shows up in the graph. And that's actually something that I think 90% of the systems we have installed, that's one of the first things we hear from their caregiver is, wow, he's really not sleeping through the night. I thought he was.
The big one really, I think, is the access to the med store, because we can tell when somebody goes to the cabinet, but we can't tell whether they took the meds once they got there. So that's a flaw. We've heard that there are some advances in this that are kind of interesting, but that's meds are important. We know that they're going there. We just don't know if they've taken them.
Proteus. Yeah, Proteus is a new one that they're putting the meds in a biomarker that's biodegradable, so they can actually tell by metabolism whether or not you took the meds.
Right. As long as, well, what if they give it to the dog? What if they give it to the dog?
You gotta put a patch on the dog.
No, I think that's a really cool and smart idea. The other thing
Why is the dog?
Son?
Something's wrong with the dog. The cooktop, does it work only with electrical cooktop or gas also?
we have two solutions for that. If it is an electric range, we'll actually determine whether it's on or off based on the current usage. If it is a gas cooktop, we're monitoring the temperature above it.
Yeah, with a thermistor.
A little bit of time delay with that.
Yeah. Yes?
Is there any bad activity sensor detector that also can indicate weight, so you can see over time how weight changes?
Not that I know.
No.
We do that.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah,
it seems like weight is something that is related to several symptoms in chronic.
And that actually kind of falls into our, this is activities of daily living monitoring. That kind of falls into our telewellness
Right.
a little
Yeah.
later on.
And
So.
there are for hospital beds.
Yeah.
Right.
Where the patient's non-ambulatory and they're on their heart failure and they want to weigh them first thing in the morning, they just press a button and it tells them the baseline, compares to the baseline and lets them know whether they gain weight overnight, whether they need Lasix, that sort of thing.
There are several host scales that have USB devices, but you have to interact with them to report.
Yeah, you got to get on the scale, right?
Yeah. Now, actually, we can do this with a Bluetooth scale where they don't have to do anything other than get on the scale and it logs in and tracks and trends. We'll talk about that a little later.
Yeah.
One of the big causes of anxiety with seniors is, the sense of security, and that's different from what I think is needed for security and what they're thinking. Have you had some experience with that, in terms of what you might do differently in upgrading a security system where it makes the resident who might be living alone, feel more confident?
I hear what you're saying, and that security actually triggers something else that I want to make sure we talk about a little bit today. Yes, in fact, we were in an installation probably 3 weeks ago where I was walking through, and the house already had a security system in it, and it doesn't really fit our model to go into standard security systems. We don't want to get distracted by that. But I walked through, and the first thing I noticed is, hey, your security system's down, your smoke sensors aren't working, this needs some attention. I don't think it fits us well to provide that service, but it's certainly something we want to be attentive to when we're in their home.
Part of it's like, are doors locked?
Yeah.
Windows, or some of that may even need to be like LED indicators or something, I don't know. But things are active.
Right.
Yeah.
Next question. Are the sensors that you use or provide that come from the same vendors or different vendors? If different vendors, how well do they work together as a solution to the problems?
That goes back to the importance of the Zigbee platform, which is an open platform. You get various manufacturers that can build devices with Zigbee built in, and they work quite well.
Yeah.
But even they all use Zigbee, but they can have different data communication format, or so they still may not work.
Well, that hasn't been our experience.
Right.
If they sign on to have Zigbee in, then they're all working off the same set of rules, and we tend to get very, very good results with it. And that's true in my automation business as well, where you really are getting a much broader sampling of manufacturers involved in a single project than we do with these fairly small, simple systems.
Howard?
You mentioned a little bit more about the general activity. Is that motion sensors that track not an alarm when someone's in the room, but perhaps track the patterns of where one is going? I mean, where they're going during the day, or where they are, not like a GPS, but just are they going into the basement? Are they going into a den? Are they staying in their bedroom?
Yeah, that's a great question, and they actually have a slide later on that sort of speaks to that, because you can look at the events in a chronological fashion. So without even being in the house, you can go, okay, got out of bed, walked around the bedroom, walked to the living room, opened the refrigerator, went back to their favorite chair. You can see that time. You could actually visualize the motions of this particular person in that house. So yeah, that's it.
How detailed?
Depends on the number of sensors, right? It's room level based, right? It's
Well,
How do you know they got into that chair?
Well, no, we use a chair sensor.
Yeah.
Most seniors have a favorite chair, so we're using the same kind of device we use in the bed,
Right.
to see when they're in that chair.
Yeah. And the thing about this is that the point here is that these are extremely customizable. Right? You can get as detailed as or as not detailed as you want, and that the beauty of that is that you're talking about a group of people out there with a very, very broad variety of needs. So the ability to customize these systems to specifically speak to those needs is a great asset. Yes?
Are the sensors silent, or do they click or make any type of noise, or do they light up?
They are silent. The motion sensors can be enabled for an LED to come on when they, when they're activated, like any motion sensor. But we like to turn them off. The whole part, one of the keys to all this is that, and the reason we're grappling with the monitored living solutions, nobody wants to be monitored, and the thing that we want to do is allow these people to continue to live the way they normally would. Because if they know they're being watched or monitored, they tend to modify their behavior. And that's the thing we don't want.
Usually battery powers for most of these sensors.
Yes. Yes.
How often is that an issue with bed or chair devices?
As far as replacing them, average life's about 3 years.
Yeah.
At which we figure the average deployment of these systems is about 2 to 2.5 years.
Yeah. That's where we look at the lifetime. If we can extend a person's stay in their home for 2 to 3 years, we've hit the mark. Anyone else? Okay, so the data is collected, sent to a server where it is trended and graphed, and then made available to any interested parties that are in this care network, which is usually a family member, neighbors, health professionals, etc. This care network is created. There's a list So what we really want is a group of people that we communicate with as to the condition of this particular person. Friends and neighbors is important. I mentioned the sensors on the exit points. We could include a neighbor that when Mr. Smith leaves the house at 11 o'clock at night, it sends them an alert just to kind of look out the window, see that he's not walking down the street, just maybe gone out to do something and he's bad. All right. Yes.
Are most of your referrals for clients coming from facilities, social workers, or direct from the consumers?
Great question. That was our biggest challenge is customer acquisition. We're actively partnering with a broad variety of professionals, home care agencies. We do have relationships with rehab centers, discharge nurses, to some extent, geriatric care managers, right?
In the case of a geriatric care manager, they often are part of the care network because they're using it as part of their assessment.
Right. Yeah. Okay. We can also build rules around these events that trigger alerts. Example is if, for instance, if your mom is typically out of bed at 7:30 every morning, and it's 9 o'clock this morning, she's not out of bed. That's an alert that you probably want to get. And that necessarily doesn't mean that you need to get in the car and drive over there and bust down the door to see if she's okay. It might just trigger a phone call going, "Hey, Mom, want to see how you're doing? How are you sleeping? Everything's going."
What kind of platform are you using for the rules? Is there any workflow system that's being accepted in the industry for that? For trigger events and follow-up?
I'm not sure how to answer that
Yeah.
question. I mean, it's a web-based interface that you're setting up.
Developing a proprietary interface?
Yeah, it's a very simple rule-based solution.
Yeah, if-then statements that are on there. Yeah.
And do you see that as an area that needs to evolve with multiple
Actually,
vendors?
that's really, well, it varies from one manufacturer to the next. There are some manufacturers out there that we have rejected specifically because
They have a proprietary.
if I have to struggle to get through the GUI,
Yeah.
then I don't feel particularly good about asking a caregiver to do it.
Right.
So, some companies are doing a better job than others on that.
And so you're using individual products, software products for that from some of the vendors?
Well, there's a specific manufacturer that we're using, which I don't think we're supposed to talk about,
Right.
brand names, that, they are making the head-end piece of this. And we actually have a pretty close relationship with them. They're making changes to their interface based on some needs that we're seeing.
So you've selected one software
That's
platform?
correct. Right.
Because one of the very first things we saw that needed to happen is we need an at-a-glance dashboard.
Right.
Red light, yellow light, green light.
Right.
And is that using the Zigbee healthcare standard?
Well, your devices are using Zigbee communicating with the head end.
Right.
Your head end is then communicating over.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The healthcare overlay for Zigbee now
Right.
is defining security and
Right.
privacy rules and whatnot.
Yes, it is actually a banking level of security.
Is that integrated into this dashboard?
Yes,
Yes, it is.
Is this a web app or?
Yes.
Yes.
Does the software support devices or sensors that is not from that manufacturer?
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
But it's a proprietary and not an open product.
Well, the Zigbee platform
Is
but,
open, right.
they have to let it in.
Yeah. Right.
So the software support any Zigbee device? Is that
Well, no, I mean, it would communicate, but you wouldn't have what you need in the GUI to support it. So, for example, they currently don't have locks
Right.
as part of this. That would not show up in the GUI because the manufacturer is not supporting it.
So what would it take for the software to support a lock?
The manufacturer just has to include it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you see this evolving to an open standard more than a proprietary product?
I don't know how to think about that for a little
Yeah.
bit. I don't know how to answer that.
Kind of like an HL7 rules-based monitoring system?
Well, there's a lot of different flavors of HL7.
Yeah.
But I think maybe the important thing is that if it's a web app, then basically you're hardware agnostic.
Exactly.
So if you wanted to work with a company where you take your outcomes from your network, you know, from your sensors, and merge that data in with another application, you could. You know, you could be looking at, you know, your screen and, you know, in a control, you know, in some type of control environment.
Right.
And there could be other data that could be accessed.
I mean, the web app is really a piece of business software converted to this purpose, and it would have administrative controls, content management, rules engines, state management. You would have a series of things that have been used in business for 30 years.
Great.
They've applied it to this specific.
Exactly.
And there probably are some competing open source applications somewhere out there. They may not have been very well finished yet.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But if the proprietary web app owner isn't careful, if they aren't friendly, then there'll be a open source standard that will gain speed. I mean, it keeps all these guys honest.
Yeah.
Generally involved.
That's right.
There's 10 minutes left.
10 minutes left? Okay. I'll talk real fast. All right, let's breeze through this. Here's the web page. All right, here's the list of sensors. Their name, the status, the last event, recent activity, and again, you know, a status that everything's cool. Down here you get a graphic representation of the green bars being today, the gray bars are yesterday, so you can actually look at history and overlay it.
You can look at that data cumulatively of all monitored devices or individually.
Right. And here's a 7-day running average of a particular, well, of all activities, again compared to history, and there should have one on an individual. There's 30 days. Okay, here's an individual sensor. This one happens to be bathroom motion, so you can see that today they got up, you know, went into the bathroom at 10 o'clock. They also did, you know, activities in and around the bathroom yesterday at around that same period of time. So looking at it historically, you can now see a trend. You know, there's this person, you know. Okay. Oops. Okay, and here's a graphic view of the sequence of events, which I spoke to a little bit earlier. You can see that you know, these are the way the succession of events that happen, so you can actually visualize the motion through a house. With respect to wellness, here's a few devices that will collect data. The weight scale, of course, blood oximeter, blood glucose meter, and a blood pressure cuff. And all this data, again, is sort of stored the same way and can be graphed and be looked at, and also then overlaid with the other sensors. For instance, if the weight scale is noticed, if you're seeing a trend of weight loss over a couple of periods, couple of months, and you can see that activity to the refrigerator has gone down over that same period of time, then it might lead you to believe that there's an appetite issue, right? And then, you know, react to that.
And that is a good insight into activities.
Yeah, so the interpretation of all this data is really, really key. The advantage of these is they allow families and caregivers to look in to seniors conveniently without having to go there and unobtrusively. We, of course, create a care network, and that information can be shared with health professionals to determine, you know, to take the next steps to take care of these folks. They're highly customizable. We can modify what is monitored, so as someone continues to live in the house, we might see the need to look at another aspect of their activities of daily living. These can be added very, very simply and easily and changed. You can modify who accesses the information and how it's transmitted, whether it's received via email, text message, whatever. The benefits for the senior is that it gives their children peace of mind. They can improve their health by better management of chronic conditions, and of course they are able to stay longer in their home with improved safety and security. The benefits for the family is that, of course, there's peace of mind that their loved ones are well. They can make better decisions about the level of care, and save a ton of money by being specific about the kind of care that's being given. And a big one here is that it does provide electronic respite for the family, the caregivers.
Does this interface with personal health records and store
Like Health Vault? Or
The tele-wellness aspect can go
Yeah.
directly to Microsoft Health Vault,
Right, right,
but not the activities of daily living.
right.
Not
Yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah.
One thing we've discovered is that the value of this, the main value, the big value of this monitored living solution stuff is it tends to be a toolbox for that classic caregiver. Usually a woman between about 45 and 55, usually has a full-time job, raising kids, and trying to take care of a senior. And we've had a number of clients where we've gotten feedback from that person afterwards about what a difference has made for them. We have one particular client that shared with us she would go see her father every other day just to touch base. And that seems to be the way the caregiver deals with their need to take care of their loved one, is by spending time with them. And it was not a pleasant visit. He felt intruded upon because she's sticking her head in the door every other day. She was resentful because it's keeping her away from her job or her kids and her family. It was a very unpleasant thing. And we put this solution in. It ran for a week or two, collected the baseline data, created the alerts, and she shared with us, she said, you know what, I go by on the weekends and see him now. And it's a pleasant visit. He's happy to see me. I'm happy to see him. There's not a lot of resentment because she's comfortable that things are the way they ought to be.
With the health professional, how is this like a clinician? I mean, is this a physician, or is it? So is it really like a medical device that you need to get FDA approval for?
The wellness things do need FDA.
The wellness kind of hit a little snag where with blood glucosometry and blood oximetry, the FDA kind of raised a red flag and said, you know, hey, wait a minute, we got to look at this. The manufacturer's perspective was the devices have already been approved.
Right.
We're just transmitting the data.
But you're packaging it differently.
We're packaging it differently, right. So that actually got put on hiatus for a while, but that's supposed to be resolved, I mean, literally within a month or so, where those will come back online. Currently, those are only supposed to be used for demo purposes.
Right.
So who is pushing that FDA side of it? Who's getting all that approval? Is that
The manufacturer.
of each of those products, or because you're providing an integrated system that's different?
The actual manufacturer of the system.
Yeah, right.
I see. Okay.
A lot of the FDA's response to the category will be based on the claims that they make about the equipment.
Right.
In other words, they, in some way, bring this upon themselves if they're not careful when they make exaggerated claims.
Right.
Anytime you're dealing with PHI, you're on a very unsteady path.
And one of the things that we discovered that we did not expect, we really thought that the tele-wellness was the big hitter. You know, this is what we really need to start and end with, and there'll be people who just do tele-wellness. What we really found in the field is that people embrace the activities of daily living monitoring, and a small percentage are interested in the tele-wellness. And I think one of the reasons is the activities of daily living really happens without the senior doing anything. It just disappears in the background. They don't have to do anything. The tele-wellness requires a little activity from them. You know, they've got to take those measurements for that to be useful, and that seems to be the difference
But in
between.
years to come, rural health will be really looking
Absolutely.
at
Right.
And the VA announced yesterday $1.36 billion worth of contracts for telehealth and all those devices that you saw there,
Yep.
and with 6 manufacturers. So they're really moving forward with that because they want to avoid their seniors, their elders having to come and wait in line at the VA.
Sure.
If you ever try to get a part there, it's ridiculous.
It's gonna be-
And so this whole thing is, there's been a lot of research that's been done, and then now they announced these contracts yesterday. 1.36 billion is not chump change.
Yeah.
That's a chunk of money.
All right. I'm going to breeze through the costs. Just simply, the average price of a semi-private room in an assisted living facility is anywhere between $4,500 and $5,000 a month. These are the costs of our solutions down here on a monthly basis. So there's huge savings for everybody. All right, and we're done. So anybody else? Are we still within our time frame?
We lost Claudia.
We lost Claudia. She split. Thank you all for your input. Yes, Brian.
Feedback respect to the individual who's being monitored, what have you done in that space? I mean, obviously, Grand Care has done like email systems, or I mean, they've built in something that's of value, so they might buy into it. What have you guys seen?
Our personal opinion, derived from our experience, is that those things will probably be more valuable as time goes on, and kind of the next generation of seniors comes to bear. Our
wellness.
Our field experience is that we just don't see. They may be a little bit interested. We're very familiar with Grand Care. We're dealers for Grand Care, and they may play with it a little bit at first, but it doesn't seem to be of great value, particularly for the additional cost that drives into the platform.
Is that even in chronic care?
Well, we're talking about email.
Well, just
So
any kind of
some of the
individual that
interface.
would be, okay, I could see having this in my home because I get this benefit from it.
Yeah, well, in the telewellness aspect, yes.
Yeah.
You get some telewellness feedback from Grand Care, but we can do that with the other platforms as well. But activities of daily living monitoring, not so much. And you brought up Grand Care. That was the very first platform that we investigated, and that is a manufacturer that, in my opinion, needs to completely rethink their interface. There's nothing logical about it or something easy about it.
Yeah.
And we actually had clients that just said, we put it in, but you take it out because we don't ever use it because it's hassle.
Are you, what is are you using a product like Grand Care or somebody's?
What we like now, largely because of the interface and the adoption of Zigbee, is a product called Close By. It's in Salt Lake City.
Yeah, we all might also add, the other thing that endears us to them is how well they interact with us and take our feedback in making refinements and implementations to their well, we've partnered very, very closely with those guys.
You the other year-round at all
With Quiet Care, they kind of went dark.
Yeah.
And we've heard they're kind of sniffing around again, but for a while you couldn't get them to the phone.
Right.
Really?
Yeah, the Quiet Care just kind of went away for a while.
Wow.
And in fact, we just earlier this week removed the Quiet Care system and replaced it with one of ours because couldn't get anybody to answer the phone.
Yeah.
In regards to feedback to the end user, something that would be advantageous is these individuals that are sitting for long periods of time in their favorite chair to avoid skin degradation and pressure wounds, to some sort of signal to you need to shift your weight, or you need to sit in a different position, or you need to get up and just walk for a little bit, or something along those lines, because it is a major problem for those who live alone and become more stable.
Frankly, that's easily done. All you got to do is build it into the if-then rule, right? If Dad's sitting in the chair for 30 minutes, then trigger this, which sends a signal saying, hey, get up, or whatever. Turn off the TV. Yeah, easy to do, but that's a very good point. And I think that the point is that if we get the caregivers that are actually looking at this to understand that, then they can build the rules around it as well.